Hello and welcome to Let's Write. I'm teacher Lindsay. I got my no sleeve shirt on today because I'm trying to be that cool teacher that everyone just calls Teach. I don't know how it's going. Let me know in the comments. I don't think I'm very cool, but I am very dedicated to writing, and that's why I created this writing class. Let's Write is an at-home writing course you can take. This is for parents who are homeschooling. This is for kids who are home from school because of COVID or who normally study at home. And it's also for anyone who wants to get into what's called a writing practice. A writing practice is when you allow your thoughts to flow freely every day. And today we're going to talk about using those when you look at something right after a writing session and think, oh, I like that. I like what I just wrote. So what happens if we're at the end of a writing session and we think, I think I've got something here. I'd really like to develop that more. So this happened to me the other day. I was writing in my writer's notebook with my timer, as always. And if you haven't seen my other videos, please go back and see what my writing practice is. As I've mentioned before, I usually write anywhere between a half an hour to 40 minutes, but please don't feel like you have to write that long or that short if that's not the right time for you. So at the end of my writing session, I realized I kind of started writing a story about a superhero. And I thought, okay, I really like that. And then in my inbox, I got a notice that an anthology is taking entries from anyone with a US address. And they wanted to know if maybe I wanted to submit something. So I thought, okay, maybe I can take this little superhero story and make it for this anthology. So what do we do with that? So first of all, keep in mind, this is our bad stuff. Even if we get a good idea, our best writing is not going to come out in here. Remember, this is where we make mistakes, where we can scratch things out, where we can do like big scribbles, where we can get angry. This is where we can forget periods, forget commas, not worry about, spelling, any of that. So we don't want to take this and put it verbatim into our computer. I write on my computer. If you like to write by hand, go for it. So instead, what we want to look at is the idea and the energy behind it. So my superhero story was very dark. And as I was reading through it, I thought, I like my idea for my hero. My hero is very different. But I don't know if I like it quite so dark. It comes across a little pretentious. So you can kind of pick and choose those moments that you really like. Maybe you really like the name that you come up with. Maybe you really like the place or kind of the pacing that you get going. See what elements of what you've written really jump out at you and start there. So for example, maybe you have one line that you really, really like. Okay, so my opening line was, she's walking into a trap. Okay, I like that. I like beginnings that really just drop the reader into the moment. No explanation, no backstory, just boom, here we are. Who is she? We're going to find out. We got to keep reading. Okay, so I like that first line. But after that, it gets kind of super dark. And, that's okay. I can go to those dark places in my notebook, but I'm just not a huge fan of writing really dark, really kind of like humanity is evil type of stories when I'm actually creating something that I'd like to be published. I also have to keep in mind that when I write that stuff, it's going to be for a more limited audience. And if I want to be in this anthology, I'd like to have a superhero story, but I don't know if I want to go like the DC Comics dark route. So what I'd rather do is take that first line, take my idea for a superhero, and start there. I've already got an interesting character who travels through shadows. And then I've got this great first line. So that's really all I need. So what if you're working with a younger author? Say your young author really loves horses and just keeps writing stories about horses. Well, there's a few things you can do. You can find a true story about a horse. That's great if your author is between like 8 and 12. They tend to really love nonfiction. See what you can learn about horses. See if you can read a true story about a horse. There's a beautiful story from Chile about a blind girl and her pony. I'm so sorry, I'm blanking on the title right now, but I will put the title down below in the description so that you can have that. And then what you want to do is ask your author, what would you do if you had a horse? Or what do you think it would be like to be a horse? And take those real things and kind of push them into that imaginary realm. Now, a younger author who really loves horses is probably going to draw unicorns or flying horses, maybe magical horses, any of those things. And so then you want to just really encourage that imaginative streak. One thing a lot of parents will do is they'll just videotape videotape, record on their cell phones. I'm a child of the 80s. And just record them telling the story. And for you, that's going to be an amazing memory. But for the kid, for your young author, that's going to be so meaningful, because what they can do then is they can go back and watch it, and you can do something that was developed by an educator named Reggio Emilio, and you can ask them, what would you change about this story? What do you like about this story, but what was not your favorite part? You want to tell it again? And you can have them revise it and say it. Now, again, this is for very young authors for whom the writing would just be too complex. And just let them revise it a few times. Reggio Emilio was a huge believer in showing kids their old work and saying, okay, this was from, yesterday, or this was from a year ago. What would you do with this today? And seeing how they could learn by looking back and reflecting on themselves. So for an older author, if you have someone, say you have someone who's very romantic, really wants to live on a ranch, work with horses one day, reads about horses all the time, but is more prone to fiction. In that case, if you find that they're writing a lot in their journal about horses, and remember, after each entry, you want to write a response, then you want to start asking questions like, oh, do you think this could be a story? Have you ever thought about writing a horse novel on your own? And make sure that they're excited about it. Make sure that the idea really comes from them and not from you. Something that Natalie Goldberg says that I really like is don't start a novel that you can't finish, because then you're going to get in the habit of quitting your novels. And that's a very dangerous habit. You have to wait until you're so excited to write it that you no longer have a choice. So just really tap into that enthusiasm for their subject matter, or maybe for a place or for a character, and offer to help them kind of develop the story and sit down and write it. Now, if you're working with someone between 13 and 18, they are probably not up for writing a novel, but they might be up for writing a long form story. And that's a great way to go. That way they can publish it online, they can share it with friends, they can create a nice hard copy for it and add it to your family library. There's a lot of things they can do with that. A great place for young writers to publish is Wattpad. That's WATTPAD, and that's kind of like a book exchange, but in today's digital age. I personally am not active on Wattpad. I just haven't found that it's for me. But almost all of my students have told me that they just live and die by Wattpad. It's amazing. It's also a place for them to make a little cash. So if you're comfortable with your author making some money, sit down together, look at some of the possibilities, and just tell them, we're going to do this for fun. If you happen to make some money, it's okay. If you don't, we don't care. We're doing this to develop as writers. For those of you who are older, maybe in university, or if you're an adult, if you are writing in your notebook and you find that thing that you like, again, I want you to kind of zero in on what aspect of it you like the most. Maybe you loved the character name that you came up with. Maybe you loved the setting. Maybe you love the tone. Maybe you like those really dark stories. Or maybe it came out really sexy and you got really into that. Or maybe it came out, very funny and silly, in some way you weren't expecting. Try and click into that and put that element of it in your story. Don't try and be committed to anything that you created in this journal. Remember, this is just where we kind of let ideas spew out. And when we do that, what happens is those original ideas tend to not be our best. It's usually our second or our third, sometimes even our 10th or our 11th idea that's really the kicker. So we have to get those other ideas out of the way. So I don't want you to be married to anything in here. Rather, I want you to take it as a jumping off point and say like, I was in a really interesting headspace that day, or I like this little juxtaposition of words that I came up with right here. I love this sentence. And just take that one thing and then go for it. You might go in a whole different direction. You might end up writing your next great novel, or you might realize, I think I need to do a little more writing practice and see if I can light something up again. If you have questions for me, if you'd like to take a class with me, you can find me on Facebook at Lima Homework Help. That's Lima Homework Help. And I teach individual classes online. I'm also more than happy to work with anyone who is ESL, Hablo Español. And I hope that all of you do your writing practice, write in your journal every single day. And I want to see those beautiful notebooks nice and full of big, scribbly, messy prose. All right, this has been Teacher Lindsay with Let's Write. I'll see you next time. Stay safe. Mwah.